How y'all doing?
Oh, they fixed it. They changed it. That's good.
Okay, so when y'all signed up for Saturday morning, what were you expecting to get? Like cartoons? Well, like Yash was saying, we started an organization called Saturday Morning. We had how many of y'all were at the Peace Brief yesterday? Oh, man.
We have free tickets, too.
Y'all supposed to be students, supposed to be up on that homework. So the one that got it all started, Keith, he should explain to y'all what that's all about.
Put me on the spot. Talking to students, you guys are probably tougher than the crowd we had yesterday. It started with a text message, and Geoff articulates this so well. But it was the impulse of a text message that I sent out to these brothers, just based on what was going on in the world. There were two fresh police shootings of an unarmed black men that really sparked it, and now we get one every week. So I said to these guys, hey, let's come together and say something. And we did. We met at the Rose Cafe in Los Angeles. We sat down for about 3 hours and had a long talk. And it was the first time, oddly enough, that we had all sat down as a group and had a conversation about anything collectively, which tells you a lot, and something we'll probably talk about today. But look what it turned into when you get together and you make a decision to change something. The organization is based on essentially creating a platform, and that platform is fed or fueled by a coalition. And as students, you are a part of this coalition. There's a tier for individuals, there's a tier for businesses, and there's a tier for students. And your only responsibility is to draft off of a brief, and we call it the Peace Brief. The Peace Brief for this year is the police and the community they serve. How can we shift ideals and perceptions between the two so that they can come together and have an understanding of one another for peace? That Peace Brief is given to you to create and do what you do. So I'm assuming I'm in a room full of planners and art directors and copywriters and account people. You guys know how to create things. And we're giving you the chance to do that. We put that stuff that you create up on our platform, and we send it out into the world. Where it goes could be anywhere from the news to it could live on our platform. We're working with all types of distributors in paid and earned media to get this out into the world. So we ask you, first of all, we invite you to be a part of the Peace Brief for this quarter and quarters to come.
It should be up Monday, right?
Yeah, we're going to try and get it up start of business on Monday. Yeah. And just to kind of build on
where did they go, though?
To SaturdayMorning.co.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we were thinking about the Peace Brief, the four of us were thinking, okay, so collectively, we've done so much in this industry for the last couple of decades. And when we were sitting there at brunch, we were saying, okay, so the same minds that have come up with great advertising for Fortune 500 clients for the last 2 decades, building, whether it's Gatorade or Nike or you name the client, we've done it. What if we took the same thinking that solved those problems and we applied it to a brief that's never been tapped before, which is peace? It's always the age-old question, isn't it? It's just like, how can problems be solved? They're solved through creative thinking. They're solved through thinking out of the box, so to speak. I have a question, though. When Keith was talking about, okay, we're talking to students here, I want to know a couple of the things that you guys are studying. So, gentlemen in the tie, what's your major? Copywriting. Okay, copywriting. You over there, what's your major? Okay, listen, we have a bit of a coalition right now, right? So imagine what happens if you and you go for a coffee and you start thinking about a Peace Brief and you apply the knowledge you have of strategic thinking and how to solve problems and create a brief, within itself. And then also, whether it's looking and researching and stuff like that to your mastery of storytelling. That's what we're getting after.
Something to add to that, you guys, you're studying copywriting. Yours is strategic advertising. I'm sure we got art directors and planners and computer geeks and all that kind of good stuff in the room. We are not necessarily looking for ads, right? So It can be a piece of legislation. It can be art. It can be music. It can be some type of technology. Some cat had a beautiful
great idea
idea.
yesterday. I hope he was here. I hope he's here. I don't think he
Probably
is.
one of the
but-
students. What was that idea?
You shared the idea. We should.
Yeah, he was a student from Creative Circus.
Uh-oh. That's some of them in the house. Okay.
Are there some circus people in here? All right, yes.
But one thing you got, so that's kind of like, could be your first real world assignment. None of you guys are working, everybody's students, right? You know, it's okay if you're not, but you know, majority of you are students. That's something, there is no reason why you guys, everybody that's in this room, shouldn't go to SaturdayMorning.co on Monday and get that peace brief, hook up with your friends, and start cooking and cracking and coming up with some ideas. You're trying to get into the business, right? Well, there's no better way than to do something, jump in on board with something like this and have one of us agree that that's something that needs to be made. We're about making stuff, we're about doing things, and that could be you guys all day long. And they're right, Sam Primo. All right, there. Everybody here, this is something I want to bring up. Not only was it unique for the four of us to work together, because we had never, all four of us had never done that before. Jay and I had worked together at Wieden and Kennedy. Has anybody heard of Wieden and Kennedy? Okay. Then we worked at TBWA, Shad Day. Anybody heard of that? Okay, we worked together, but this is the first time all four of us had done this. When I was coming up, and I say it's the same thing with the fellas here, I wasn't seeing four black chief creative officers running the creative departments at their agencies with hiring power, so on and so forth. I didn't see that. On top of that, award winning. Jay has won everything under the sun, working on Nike, working on Gatorade, working on Beats. Keith has won everything under the sun, working on brand Jordan. Man right here, Geoff, same type of thing with Adidas, Gatorade, Halo. Made me want to get back into playing video games when I saw that Halo joint. Had you heard of any of us? How many had heard of anybody up here on stage?
Okay, good.
Okay, because that's the first thing, and you can go back to Kobe Bryant, you can go back to Michael Jordan, so on and so forth, always related to sports. They know their history.
Right.
And that's mad important. Last year, I asked about Jeff Goodby, and nobody had heard of Jeff Goodby, which was kind of crazy. So starting off with Jay Anta, he's the one with the solemn, deep thinking face right there. Start off with Jay, and we should go down and hit the cats with a story, impart some wisdom on them, and then we'll open up to questions.
Absolutely.
I don't know where to start.
Start with some of your experiences, particularly at Gatorade and the types of things you had, at Martin Agency, and particularly how that experience was, and you had a goal in mind of where you wanted to be and how you made that happen.
Yeah. So I didn't know I wanted to be in advertising. I kind of grew up liking Saturday morning cartoons, reading comic books, drawing, music, all those things that kids do. But it eventually led me into pursuing fine arts education in undergraduate school. And along the way, I studied photography as well. I met a creative director from the Martin Agency, and I took an advertising class, and I didn't know anything about advertising at all. I just fell into this class by accident. And everyone had brought ads to show the instructor. I only had photographs. And he looked through my photographs and said, "You should be an art director." And I'm like, "What's that?" And then he pulled out an art directors club annual and a one-show annual and put that in front of me. And I started flipping through it. And I was a little blown away, but a couple of ads stood out to me. There was one done by an agency in Portland called Wieden & Kennedy for Nike. And I flipped through it again, I saw something else they'd done for Maxell cassettes. I flipped through it again, I saw something else they'd done. And for whatever reason, it just blew my mind. So after I got out of undergraduate school, I went back to Portfolio Center, and Circus hadn't existed at the time, just to kind of make sure that I could, be good enough to put together a book to get into the business, and I ended up at the Martin Agency. At the time, I was the first African-American that the Martin creative that they'd hired in the history of that company, which wasn't a big deal, and it wasn't why I wanted to be there or not. But
Bullshit. That's a fucking big deal. So, Martin Agency is one of the greatest agencies in the world. That was a big freaking deal.
So enter me into the doors of Martin Agency, and it's time to show and prove. But at the same time, I'd contacted Jimmy, and I'd seen some work that he'd done, and he and I began to talk, and I really wanted to be at Wieden & Kennedy. 3 years later, I'm at the doorstep of Wieden & Kennedy, and to go from, it took me 7 years to get that job, and Martin Agency was cool, but then walking into Wieden, knowing the history, knowing the expectation, knowing the client, knowing the personalities, it wasn't even humbling. It was, I did this. And when I did this, I put my head to work and, ended up really, and it was one of the most amazing experiences of my career up to that point. I had Jimmy flanking me. I had so many great people as mentors, and I had great clients, I had great work experiences. I had some craziness as well, but that's just the nature of advertising. And from there, Jimmy and I ended up back at Chiat Day, which the level up from Wieden was going from purely being a creatively minded art director to walking into a leadership role, which became the responsibilities I accepted at Chiat on Gatorade. And that was a whole other level of understanding, discipline, humility, humbleness, and we did some really fun work there as well. And from there, I ended up going to Apple Beats by Dre, and again, just assuming a whole other level of leadership and thought process and thinking more strategically, and just taking my collection of experiences, but at each place, I didn't bring what I brought from the last place, I walked into the door fresh and forgot and didn't bring this is what we used to do at Wieden, or we used to do at Martin, or at Beats. It's a different paradigm. And I think along the way, what I've always loved about people who are highly creative is they always try to, not best themselves, but they try to just keep amplifying. And that's led me to the experience that I'm at now, which is, lead creative role at Twitter. And I will tell you, this is from a brand perspective, there is nothing more fulfilling, rewarding, scary, and just unexpected as walking into a brand like Twitter, which has never done any brand advertising, being the person who's supposed to be the catalyst and supportive of everyone's efforts, and to put some numbers on the boards. It's trumped every advertising experience I've had up to this point, but that's where I'm at right now.
So Jay's story was for you guys. Now, these other two stories are for you guys, but they're for me too, because I could sit out there, because I don't know their stories. I know Jay. I've known Jay for years, but I don't know nothing about the beginnings of Keith and Jeff's ad careers.
All right. So I, similar to John, started out as a creative, loving soul. Mostly drawing and painting, and I got into Syracuse because of that. I went in there to be a fine artist. I didn't go in to be an advertising person. I wanted to just paint. And I had very liberal parents. My dad is a minister, and my mom is a speech pathologist.
She's a what?
Speech pathologist.
I can't even say that word.
Yeah. I had to learn how to say that word. Yeah. So their goal was, for me growing up, was you can do whatever you want as long as you're not a stuttering atheist. So I decided I wanted to paint, and I went to Syracuse and got into that world. It kind of worked its way into illustration. Became good friends when I was in high school with Kadir Nelson, who I think you know.
Yep.
who went to Pratt, and he's a great artist, and this is what we wanted to do growing up. But I worked my way over to graphic design, and took a class in graphic design, and I fell in love with graphic design, and got my major. It's called communication design, and the good thing about that major is they taught you how to think conceptually. And if there are any designers in the audience, you can do graphic design in two ways. You can do it conceptually, where there's a big idea, or you can design things that end up just being wallpaper, that have no idea, and those things don't last long. We were taught to think conceptually, and once I graduated, I started out as a graphic designer and freelanced at a lot of great places, and ended up taking a job at what I thought was a good place. And then I got a phone call. I don't even know to this day how he saw my book, but from someone who worked at DDB in Dallas, and said, "Hey, you want to get into advertising?" I said, I don't even know what advertising is." He's like, "I'll teach you. Don't even worry about it." So I went out there and learned and built my book in a year.
Wow.
And studied under the sky and learned what advertising was.
You remember who it was?
Yeah, John Pucci, I'll say his name. Yeah, good guy. He was a Syracuse grad. I don't even know what he's doing now. I should look him up. But I left because I realized that A, I grew up in Dallas and I didn't want to stay in Dallas. But B, there was a whole other world out there in advertising that I wanted to go and explore. So that brought me to Ogilvy and Mather in Chicago. And I spent some time there, again, sort of crafting my skill, trying to figure it out. Rick Boyko, who was running Ogilvy, New York, saw my work, asked me if I wanted to come and work on American Express at Ogilvy in New York. I said, sure. So I did that for 3 years and worked at Ogilvy, New York. And then I got, I'll never forget the day, I got a random text message from a guy named Chuck McBride. And he said, "Hey, I want you to meet me at this hotel." And I knew who he was. And he and I worked for this crazy cat.
Yep. Chuck is a superstar in the agency.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
In the agency business.
Yeah, and he told me to meet him at the hotel, so I was all ready to go. I got suited up. I had my portfolio. This is back in the day when your portfolio was an actual portfolio, right? So I'm standing out in front of the hotel. He's like, "I'll meet you in front of the hotel." I'm standing out in front of the hotel. 10 minutes goes by. 20 minutes goes by. 30 minutes goes by. I was like, "Oh man, I've been left at the altar," right? So I'm texting him, and as soon as I turned, and I swear to God, I haven't talked to him about this. I swear to God, he was waiting at the end of the block to see how long I would stand there.
Really?
As soon as I turned around to walk away, he pulls up in a limo, gets out. He says, "I've seen your work. Call so and so, and come out to San Francisco and let's talk."
That's great.
Went into his room.
He just wanted to see how long you were going to wait. Remember that lesson. Remember that.
So, got the job there and worked there and worked with some of the most amazing people. Had a chance to work on Adidas, which was great. And met some friends in the business who, to this day, are some of my best friends.
Were you all at
We just
together?
missed each other.
Just miss each other.
Oh, okay.
We just missed each other. So after
Can't have
that,
two in one place other than you.
yeah, it's like, yeah.
It's not allowed.
They, and then I got a call from Dan Wyden, and that was as Gianta described ever so well. It was life changing for me because I love that agency. I admired that agency. I admired the work that these guys were doing there at the time, and they were looking for someone to run Brand Jordan in New York. That was another dream come true because you guys are younger than us, but Michael Jordan was everything. He was everything, and he was everything for me. So I said, well, all right, let's do it. I'll tell this one story, and I'll cut it short because I know we don't have a lot of time. But and I know Dan will be okay with me telling this story. But when we went to meet Dan, it was me and my writing partner, and who runs BBH New York now. He's a great guy.
This is a San Francisco story, right?
Yeah, this is a San Francisco story. So I'm on an interview with Dan Wyden, and he asked us to meet him at a restaurant. So we go to the restaurant, and we're there, and my partner and I are there with a woman we all know, Melanie Myers, and Dan, and we're just sitting there, and we're eating. The bread comes out. So the bread comes out, Dan grabs a piece of bread, and he's talking about some play with my writing partner. And all of a sudden, he stops talking, and he looks around, and he holds his mouth, And he pulls out his front tooth. He said, my tooth fell out. I never met the man. so I'm like, oh no. I'm never gonna get this job. So oddly enough, he goes to the bathroom, he comes back, and he's like, I'm fine. And he's talking, he's trying to hold it in there. And it comes out again. I was like, listen, Dan, I live here. My dentist is literally around the corner. Let's just go. Let's get this figured out. So we go to the dentist. We walk in. The dentist hooks him up. We walk out, and he's like, "Hey, do you guys want to work at Wieden & Kennedy or not?" And I have so much love for that guy. I mean, I've obviously seen him a few times since I've worked at Wieden & Kennedy. But I think we all share the same sort of affection for him. He's a great guy, and he's done a lot for people of color in this business, and he's done a lot for this business. After Wieden & Kennedy, I did a few things. I went to Martin for a short while. I decided to start my own business, which I did for 4 years, which is a long story that I won't get into. And it was great. And we just recently got acquired by Butler, Shine, Stern & Partners. So our company was acquired about a year ago, and that's where I work now.
Fantastic, man. You're right. It's like just hearing the story about these guys, their biographies is amazing. I'll tell you mine. I'm trying to figure out what part would be most relevant for this crowd. So I'll front load the front part, and then I'll just quickly go through the last bit. I started my advertising career right here in New York. I went to Pratt. So in Brooklyn, and this was before the Miami ad schools of the world. This is before the creative circuses of the world. This is where you would either be an art student and you would find out how to get in advertising, or you would just take a bunch of classes that added up to some sort of an advertising type discipline. I also went in as a painting major. So when I went to Pratt, I went through the fine arts school. See, it's important to understand my father's from Guyana, South America. So he calls me my sophomore year and he's like, Geoff, so you're going to be a junior next year. So have you decided on a major? And I said, yeah, Dad, no accent, of course. I'm like, yeah, Dad, I'm gonna be a painter. And he goes, oh, yeah, but what are you gonna do for a living? All right, thanks, Dad. So I decided to change my major to communication arts. Apparently, I made the wrong decision. So I was in the communication arts school here. And I wanted to work at Chiat Day, because at the time, in the early 90s, Chiat Day was the shit. So I talked to my teacher at the time, Cheryl Schwab, and I told her, I'm going to send my portfolio to Chiat Day, and this is my senior year. I'd done well in my classes. I've always kind of like believed in the principle of surrounding yourself with the best people, and this doesn't detract from that one bit. And my teacher at the time, I remember saying, and this is important, especially for the students, don't ever let anyone tell you that you can't do anything. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you can't work anywhere. It's bullshit. Don't let them say that. It's poison. And she said, I just want to let you know that it's a very, very difficult agency to get into, so you should have a backup plan. I'm hard-headed. I don't have a backup plan. I have a front-up plan. So I said I'm going to go work there. So I didn't have an interview. I just went there, and I brought my portfolio. And I was asked by the receptionist if I was, who was I here to meet, and I said Michael Smith, who was the creative director at the time of the New York office. And they said, okay, well, he doesn't have you on his schedule. I said, I'll wait. So I spent 3 hours in the reception office, and people were coming in, they're going to lunch, they're coming out. And I think what happened is it got to human resources that there was some cat in the lobby who wouldn't leave. And so Michael Smith came out, and he said, hey, my name is Michael Smith. And I said, very well aware of who you are. And he said, can I help you? And I said, I want to meet you. And he goes, do you have an appointment? I said, no, I don't. And he goes, come on back. Looked at my book, liked my book, I got the job. So that was my very first job in advertising, and it was after Chiat that I worked at a couple other places, Publicis here in New York. Another funny story. In college, when I was at Pratt, I worked at a restaurant called Two Steps Down, which is in Brooklyn, and there was a patron that came like every week on Thursday. His name was Spike Lee. And I'll never forget the day I served Spike Lee's table, and I got to have a conversation with him. And I'm bringing this up because it'll make a point later on. And I felt like one of the best things that happened to me in New York was just being able to A, get a job at Chiat, and B, be able to serve Spike, his linguine. So I left New York. I moved to Chicago. I worked at DDB. I worked on a bunch of great accounts. And one of the assignments I was working on, there was an opportunity to pull a director. So I said, well, why don't we see if we can get Spike Lee to direct it? And it turned out that he was able to do it, and it was for Budweiser. So I'll never forget this. So he took the job. We did an assignment together, and then we went out to dinner. And we're sitting across the table from each other. And I'm like, Spike, I'm going to tell you a story. And I go, there was this kid who was at 2 steps down, and he worked as a busboy, and he served your table linguine, da-da-da. And he goes, oh, that's interesting. Okay, why would you tell me the story? And I go, because that was me. And I said, the kid that you knew in college who was like, whatever, 18, 19 years old, served you, is now sitting across the table and about to work with you. In 1996, he and I opened Spike DDB together, which is still open today. Okay, so...
I didn't know you co-opened that with him. No shit. See, I told you I need to be out there with y'all.
Yeah. So Spike Lee and I, in 1996, look at the articles, it's true, we co-founded Spike DDB. It still runs today. So I worked with him on that for 2 years, and then I left, and I got a call that Keith got to go work at Chiat in San Francisco under Chuck McBride. And that was based, again, on work. The work comes first. He saw a commercial that I had done at DDB for Gatorade, where Michael Jordan, a 39-year-old Michael Jordan, plays his younger self in a one-on-one game of basketball. It's a game that no one ever saw. Happened in a gym at the United Center. And who would be better? Battle of will versus skill. There was no winner. It was just, it's Michael Jordan. He can't beat himself, right? And he saw that commercial, and he called me, and he said, okay, listen, I need somebody to work on Adidas. I saw that. It was a spot that Nike never did, but these guys never did. And I felt real good about that. So I took the job, worked there. And then the last couple years of my life have just been working with the people that I love to work with, working on video games. I'm passionate about things. I like to work on things I'm passionate about. I'm currently in LA at the Creative Artists Agency. So now I've transitioned my career more from advertising into entertainment. And every step along the way, I've held 2 principles, which is to surround yourself with the absolute best people you possibly can. And the second is to remain hard-headed.
So look, you guys just go online and read about my boring shit. And then, because I think you guys need to ask questions. And you've heard from 3 of the masters here. You can just go online.
Hold on.
No, they need to ask questions. We only got 2 minutes.
Okay. All right.
So one thing I will say, and Geoff touched upon it, be hard-headed. Because 9 times out of 10, you aren't going to have that experience that Geoff had where your dream agency, that you're going to walk right in the door and you're going to sit and wait on the creative director to come out and so on and so forth. Probably not going to happen. Lord's willing it does, but probably not. And you're going to have that door slammed in front of your face. You're going to have people tell you you aren't good enough, writing's not good enough, art direction not good enough, whatever. You all heard this earlier, right? When I said this earlier? Right? Okay, so we won't go over that. Burn that into your psyche, into your mind, into your soul, and don't worry about somebody telling you aren't good enough, but keep working, striving. Anyway,
well, one thing I want to say really quickly is, and this was said to me a long time ago by a writer named Charlotte Moore, who used to work at Wieden Kennedy, your portfolio is just as much a tool to evaluate people as it is there a tool to evaluate you.
Right.
So to that point, if you walk someplace and someone doesn't like something that you've written or you've art directed or your point of view, it may not be a place you'd want to work anyway. Because if you got a job at that place and they had you doing something and you just really want to get there, and then they have you working on, and you can't bring your best or you can't, grow into what you want to become, you still kill yourselves. Questions?
Your stories resonated with me. I'm also a graphic design major, and trying to transition over the year because I got into advertising through the One Club. I did one of their competitions and stuff. So coming from graphic design, it's kind of an unknown feeling going into advertising. Like, how can I be useful? How can I transition into it? You guys have any advice?
I mean, for me, again, because my professors were amazing and everything was about concept,
Yeah.
right? I mean, they had this corny line that's stuck in my head is practice safe design, use a concept, right? So the idea that never left me. So everything I did had a concept. And that's what advertising is, right? The best ads, if we call them that, they have a big idea. So if you are working on your book as a designer and it has a core central idea to everything you do, or you can articulate why you created that, what the narrative is behind that. It's the delineation between what we do up here and that is this thing. And I'll also say, I don't like hiring art directors who don't know how to design.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, if you're an art director and you don't have at least a sense of typography and design and space and color, then who are you expecting to do that?
You know, and also, like Jimmy and I, and Geoff as well, but Lee Clow, who essentially, you know, Shy at Day is an art director's agency where White is a writer's agency. And I
Very
think
true.
if you look at the work that Lee Clow is, and it's from a design sensibility to Keith's point, I think I love design as well, but you also, as a graphic designer, look for places that are informed by that.
Right.
Because, you know, you'll be an asset as opposed to the other way around.
Hi. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it. My question is regarding being a junior versus a senior creative, because a lot of you, it sounds like you started in a different field and someone kind of brought you in, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you started as a junior. So what really distinguishes the difference between coming in as a junior or as a senior or a lead creative?
You know what? I came in as a junior. I mean, I think I just knew what I wanted, so I was able to jump in and just hit the ground running. But nothing was given. You know, I just think, you know, all of us found a way through our individual passions, but you're going to come into a situation as a junior, and that's just the way it is.
I think I started under a junior.
I would say be humble. I would say be humble. I think that just in general, there's a sense that some people have of entitlement.
Yeah.
Like they want to come in and run the company. And I think to my hard-headed philosophy, you should want that ultimately, but use it as an opportunity to learn from other people.
Yeah.
Like Jayanta and Keith said, land at a place that feels like you, feels like home, and then learn.
You know, and one other thing, I think being hard-headed is important because it's a North Star for having a point of view, but the greatest asset that I've had is in this business that I started in the business with was being able to listen. Yeah. And I think if you don't have that skill, all the hard-headedness and great work and who you know is not going to get you anywhere.
You know, to add to that, you need to absorb and be a sponge, to Jay's point about listening, first, before you can decide, you know, who you are as an ad person. You need to learn all these various points of view. And a lot of times I went into shitty agencies in the beginning. So I was learning how not to do stuff. So I had the knowledge that, okay, I don't want to do it that way, don't want to do it that way, don't want to do it that way, until I got before some of the masters, which were like for me, Joe Muse, Dan Wyden, and a bunch of folks. I could go on and on and on. John Jay at Wyden and Kennedy and Lee Clow. And then I was learning how to do it. But you can learn from the idiots as well as the geniuses.
Yeah. This brother here's Hennessy.
Very quick question. I noticed all of you have very distinct styles, right? So as creatives in that. Okay, so as creatives in the advertising industry, especially being black men, at what point did you know what your voice was, and when did you settle into it and acknowledge it and defend, be persistent with that despite the negative response to just who you were?
Well, I mean, I'll jump on that one real quick.
That's a good question.
I got to discover my voice through the projects I worked on and the people that I surrounded myself with. Like Jimmy Smith, I had a mentor. And Jimmy has been, will be, and in the next life will also still be my mentor. But, I found people that I I really respected. And I think through the projects I got to work on, I began to see, oh, wait a minute, I love Kool and the Gang. Let me put that track on this LeBron's joint. Oh, I love this artist from when I was a little kid. That might be amazing to use for an ad. You know, it was the other way around. I took all of what I grew up with and all my experiences, and that became an amplification of not a voice, but just who I am. You know, so, you know, that's kind of how it happened for me.
Yeah, I'd say a voice is very different than a style. I'd be careful of having a style, but always have a voice. Because I think you want to be able to be malleable, and your voice can transition and turn into all these different things and all these different styles. If a style is driving you, then it could fall short in certain situations, and your voice is limitless. So I hopefully my career I always try to live by that.
Yeah, I'm going to build on both. It's kind of a product of, like, you know, early '90s hip hop. You know, big James Bond fan, big superhero fan, big time gamer. And so your superpowers are going to be made up of all your experiences, right? Growing up in Detroit, living in New York. It's impossible not to have that influence your work.
Yeah.
It's impossible not to have that influence your work. Now, that said, we work on brands, right? So the goal is to you know, take a brief and then take it and translate it into some sort of a solution, but you'll find your voice in that.
You know, another thing, my thing was comic books, the Bible, and Black Power. I grew up in the 60s. So I had to learn when to, John Jay, who's a former partner and legend over at White and Kennedy, now is at Uniqlo. Uniqlo, right? Yeah. He's the global head of, you know, some stratospheric thing. And he said, you know, every time you show me an ad, it always has Jesus Christ, the comic book, or some black thing. So you do have to know when you can pull them cards, you know? Yeah. And you got to know when to hold it. Yeah. Damn, I want to put in there first 30. Oh, okay. you got to know when to pull it and when to just hold it back and do something new. Definitely don't be afraid to, you know, walk into some other boundaries there.
But the last thing, because I'm just looking around at the room and you're talking about voice and style, and I look through the tens and tens of people in the audience, and I see lots of unique voices, styles, smiles, and brain power, and just illumination happening, and all these things. You carry it. So it's not something you find; it's something you grow into. You know. So good luck.
Yeah. You know, one thing I always say this. You white people that come to where all the black people is like, that's the shit. That's the bomb. That's what I was talking about. Row. You got your comfort zone, and then you guys have broken out of it. The Hispanics and the Asians, same thing. And that's what all of us as a collective, that's what Saturday morning is about, is stepping outside of our comfort zone and learning something new, understanding other people who don't look like us, talk like us, act like us, and working together with them. You guys in this room, back to start with the beginning, are already on the path of what Saturday morning is all about.
That's right.
So that's actually a great segue. My name is Sarah Singh. I'm currently a student at the Brand Center. And we learn a lot about collaboration with different tracks, copywriting, art direction, management. And my question is about the piece briefs and sort of the work that you guys do. To what extent does that live online or live on the news? And to what extent do us as creatives and you guys as an agency push to actually make that work a change in our communities? That's
a great question. I wish you were there yesterday.
We went through everything.
We are going to partner with, I forget her name from VCU. Elena. And you will be answering that question for yourself, because the piece brief is going to go out to the Brand Center. You'll be working directly on it. The back end of your question is a simple answer. It's, you know, based on what the content is, we'll distribute it to the appropriate distribution channel. Right. So if you create a film and we feel like it lives best on SaturdayMorning.co, or it's something that we want to send out to the Wall Street Journal or Ad Age in collaboration with Saturday Morning, we'll do that. It's all based on what you create.
Yeah, and be patient with us, give us a little bit of time. I think on the site we'll do a truncated version of the presentation that we did yesterday, because the question keeps coming up, so that you get kind of like a mini brief of what we're looking to achieve together. Okay, someone's over there.
Hey guys, we're gonna wrap it up, but we'll take one more question.
Can we get
Is that
two
cool?
more?
Boom, boom.
They're quick.
2 more.
All right.
3.
Now.
Tasha Gilroy Wienar, I'm the program manager for diversity and inclusion at the agency. And I don't think these young people quite understand how, like, I'm starstruck. This is amazing to see for African American, or as I would say, Black men, representing creative in our business. This is, I don't think they understand the gravity of that. So thank you for breaking through the barriers and making it possible, because you're standing on their shoulders. So I just wanted
beautiful.
to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That wasn't a question, so we got 2 more.
Yeah. Told you. 3.
I don't know, Jimmy. I think that counts.
She's
I
gonna
don't
say that. She can keep talking.
Yeah.
know. Go ahead.
There's a question right here.
Boom,
We got a
boom.
question over there? Okay.
Let's go here.
Hi, my name is Alyssa Gallardi from Temple University. My question is, everyone always says, the advice, don't listen to the no's, don't listen to the no's, listen to the no's. But what exactly did you guys do to turn those no's to a yes? Like, what did you study? Who did you listen to? What did you go home and say to yourself or do to be like, all right, I'm making this better? Because something, had to change or tweak, you know what I'm saying? So what got you to the point where I'm getting yeses?
I haven't told this story before, but I used to keep a journal, and I would occasionally have going through school, or particularly when I got to the Martin Agency, I would write things down, and there were more kind of goals, aspirations, reflections on the day, and those no's really, that's where I became hard-headed, and I turned no's into ways of thinking about how to outsmart myself and the people who were saying no, and I did that through the work. 100%, it became so much about the work that if someone was saying no, it wasn't because the idea wasn't good, it's because they were either, damn, got me, or they just they wanted to marginalize. But no's never meant anything except make the work better and better and better.
Yeah. You grow from failure. So a no should be seen as a learning, as a lesson, as a teachable moment for you to go out and improve. And sometimes those no's, or sometimes you're not ready, or sometimes it's not good enough, may be valid. So really use that as an opportunity to go back, take a look at it, and if you believe in it, keep it in your book, right? But also listen to Gianta's point, because sometimes you're, and pay attention to who's giving you that critique.
So I was going to say,
know?
who's saying no?
Yeah, it depends on who's giving you that critique. If John Jay is telling you no, you may want to listen. There might be some truth there.
I had a creative director tell me early on in my career that you have the same 24 hours as everybody else. Yeah. It's whether it's Mohandas Gandhi or it's Barack Obama or it's, name it, Mel Gibson and whoever, you have the same 24 hours. It's what you do with it. So my principle especially has always kind of been invested in, my father, he came here to this country with nothing and he built something. And so I'm just going to outwork everybody. That was always my thing. It's just I'm going to use my 24.
And you all have to be careful with at this stage of the game, you have to be careful with the no's and the yes and what's good and what's not. And so do get mentors that you admire, dig their work and whatever, have them, because they'll guide you through that. Like if somebody's telling you no, and something else, you take it to the mentor, and the mentor might, fuck them, they don't know what they're talking about. But seriously, and then also study the master's work. One Show. The One Show does an annual, every year that you can go. You can go online and look at the archive from the One Show. Go to check out the Can stuff, D&AD. And if you don't know what I'm talking about. You need
Learn
to
it.
know what I'm talking about.
And I would say study it so much till you become cynical, because I'm extremely cynical. And I think to Jimmy's point, also inform it with stuff outside of advertising, because that's the stuff that enriches and makes advertising push forward in terms of thinking.
I kept one email from Wieden and Kennedy. I printed it out, and it sits in my drawer in my desk, and it's from Riswald. And he sent me an email after a thing I did for Nike, Leroy Smith, and the email said, "You finally got something wrong," right? And if you really think about that, you know, we spend a lot of time trying to perfect things, trying to make them absolutely digestible for everyone, right? Is so-and-so gonna like this? Are my parents gonna like it? Well, what about you? Do you like it? Are you happy with the product that you made? And sometimes getting something wrong is actually getting it right, especially in the marketplace, in the cynical marketplace that we.
And one last thing for me is being afraid and walking in the, actually, let me rephrase that. The unknown is a wonderful thing. Walking into work every day not knowing, that is one of the most amazing feelings. And as students, not knowing what's gonna, you know, the outcome of where you wanna be or where you'll end up, that's a beautiful place to be, absolutely.
Last thing, Yash.
Last thing?
No more questions. Just let me say this last thing.
All right, you get the last word, Jimmy.
I was fired twice, 1988 and 1990. Don't be afraid to be fired. I remember the creative director, "Come on, Jimmy, you know what the client wants. You know what they want." I say, "I do, but I can't do that." I got fired. And so don't go out there, even if you end up the way Geoff did, where you got your first dream gig and all, don't go spend up all that money, don't go be buying the cars and whatever. Put that money in the bank, because you need that in the bank so you can be comfortable if you got to walk away, or if they want you to walk away. You got to put yourself in a position so that you can get fired and be all right with it.
And
that makes sense.
And it's just advertising. You're not saving lives.
That's right.
Exactly right.
That's right. Although Saturday morning is trying to save lives.
Hey guys, thanks for having us.
All right, guys, on that note, thank you guys.